The first time I noticed it, I didn't think anything was wrong with the door. I thought the problem was how long I stood there watching it. I'd been living in the apartment for about 5 months, long enough that the building's sounds had become part of my background. The elevator cables groaning at odd hours. The radiator in the hallway ticking when the heat cycled on. Mrs. Palova in 4C playing her television loud enough that I could hear the cadence of dialogue through the wall, but never make out the words. Normal building sounds. The vocabulary of an old structure doing what old structures do. My apartment was 4A. 4th floor, end of the hall. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. A kitchen that was technically separate from the living room but connected by an archway wide enough that the distinction felt ceremonial. The building was on Mott Street, in a part of the city where the rents were still possible if you didn't mind a walk-up. A laundry room that flooded twice a year. And a super named Nico who answered maintenance requests, the way someone answers a phone they're not sure is for them, reluctantly, and, after several rings. Across the hall from me was 4B. I'd lived next to it for 5 months, and I'd seen the door open exactly twice. Both times, a woman came out, mid-40s, maybe older, short hair. She wore a coat both times, once a tan raincoat, once a heavier winter one, and she moved with the particular quickness of someone who doesn't want to be in the hallway longer than necessary. We didn't speak. The first time, she glanced at me and nodded, the way neighbors do when they've committed to not knowing each other. The second time, she didn't look at me at all. Her door was a standard apartment door, same as mine. Dark wood, brass numbers, a peephole at eye level, a deadbolt above the knob. The building had those hydraulic door closers mounted at the top, the kind you see in every older apartment building and most commercial spaces. A metal arm attached to a cylinder that controls the speed at which the door swings shut. You open the door, you step through, the closer pulls it back at a steady, regulated pace. Every door on the 4th floor had one. They all closed at the same speed. I knew this because I'd walked down that hallway hundreds of times, and the sound of doors closing, that slow, pressurized hiss, followed by the click of the latch, was as uniform as the floor tiles. On a Wednesday evening in February, I came home from work around 6:30. I was carrying a bag of groceries in one arm and my keys in the other hand, and as I reached my door, the door to 4B opened. The woman stepped out, same quickness, same avoidance of eye contact. She turned toward the elevator. I glanced at her door as it closed behind her. And I noticed the way you notice something, not because it's dramatic, but because it's fractionally wrong, like a picture frame tilted 2 degrees that the door was closing slowly. Not broken slowly, not stuck on the carpet slowly, just measurably slower than every other door on the floor. The hydraulic arm was pulling it back at maybe half the speed it should have been. The hiss was lower, longer, drawn out. The door took what felt like a full 8 or 9 seconds to travel from open to closed, when every other door on the floor did it in about 3. I stood in the hallway and watched it close. The latch clicked. The sound was normal. Everything about the door was normal except the speed. I unlocked my own door, went inside, put the groceries away. I didn't think about it again that night. Hydraulic closers have adjustment valves. The speed is controlled by a small screw on the cylinder. If the screw loosens or the fluid inside the cylinder degrades, which happens, especially in old buildings, the door will close slower. It's a maintenance issue. Nico would get to it eventually, or he wouldn't, and the door would keep closing slowly, and no one would care because no one ever cares about the speed at which a neighbor's door closes. I thought about it the way you think about a faucet drip you can hear from the other room. You notice it, you identify it, and then you let it become part of the background. A week later, I came home at roughly the same time. As I turned the corner from the stairwell, I'd started taking the stairs after the elevator made a sound in January that I didn't trust. I saw the door to 4B in the process of closing. I hadn't seen anyone in the hallway. The woman must have just left or gone back inside, and the door was swinging shut on its own. It was closing faster, noticeably faster. Not slamming, the hydraulic arm was still controlling it, but the speed was different from the week before, where it had taken 8 or 9 seconds. Now it was maybe 2. The door swung through its arc quickly, smoothly, and the latch clicked with a crispness that sounded almost emphatic. I stood in the hallway. I looked at the door. I looked at my own door. I opened mine, watched it close. 3 seconds, normal speed. I opened it again. 3 seconds, same. I walked to 4B. I didn't touch it, it wasn't my door, but I looked at the hydraulic closer mounted at the top. Standard model. The same brand and style as every other door on the floor. Nothing visually different. I went inside my apartment and made dinner and told myself that Nico had adjusted the valve. That the woman in 4B had put in a maintenance request, and Nico had come up, turned the screw, and corrected the speed. The fact that he'd overcorrected, making it faster than standard rather than returning it to normal, was exactly the kind of result you'd expect from a super who treated every repair like an inconvenience. I believed that explanation for about 3 days. On Saturday, I was in the hallway carrying my laundry to the basement. The door to 4B was closed, as always. But as I passed it, I heard the lock disengage, the deadbolt turning, then the knob. The door opened, I could see it in my peripheral vision, and I turned my head because turning your head when a door opens 3 feet from you is reflexive, not intentional. The woman stepped out. This was the 3rd time I'd seen her, and the first time I registered her as someone enduring something rather than just passing through. She was wearing the tan raincoat again. She pulled the door shut behind her, not letting the closer do it, but pulling it with her hand, the way you close a door when you want to control the sound. But the closer resisted. The door didn't close at the speed her hand was pulling it. It moved slower. She was pulling, and the closer was holding it back, keeping it open longer than her effort should have allowed. Her arm was extended behind her as she walked toward the stairs, still gripping the knob, and the door was barely moving. It was like watching someone try to close a door underwater. She let go. The door continued closing on its own. And now, released from her hand, it moved at a completely different speed. Fast. It snapped shut in less than a second, the latch slamming into the frame with a sound that was too loud for a hydraulic closer, the kind of sound a door makes when there's nothing controlling it at all. The woman flinched. I saw her shoulders tighten. She didn't turn around. She kept walking to the stairs and disappeared into the stairwell, and her footsteps faded going down. I stood in the hallway holding my laundry basket. The door to 4B was closed. Silent. Ordinary. I went to the basement. I did my laundry. I sat on the plastic chair next to the dryer and listened to the mechanical tumble and the hum of the fluorescent tube above me, and I thought about the door. Not the speed, the resistance. The door had resisted being closed by the person who lived behind it. It had fought her hand, and then, once she let go, it had closed itself, immediately, forcefully, as if her touch had been the obstruction. I know how that sounds. A hydraulic closer is a mechanical device with a piston and a valve and a fluid chamber. It does not have preferences about who touches the door. Temperature changes affect fluid viscosity. Humidity can swell wooden door frames. Buildings shift on their foundations. None of these things constitute a door choosing how to behave. I know all of that. I didn't realize when observation turned into waiting, or when waiting turned into listening. And by the time I noticed I was adjusting my routine around a door that wasn't mine, it was already too late to call it a coincidence. Over the next 2 weeks, I started paying close attention. Not obsessively, I didn't sit in the hallway and stare at the door. But I noticed things when I passed it. The gap under the door. The quality of light that came through that gap. The sounds. The gap was standard. 1/2 inch, maybe slightly more, between the bottom of the door and the hallway floor. But the light that came through it was inconsistent. Most apartments in the building had the same layout, the same overhead fixtures, and the light that bled under the door into the hallway was a warm, steady yellow. The light under 4B's door changed. Sometimes it was that same warm yellow. Sometimes it was cooler, almost blue-white, like daylight coming from a direction where there shouldn't be daylight. And twice, both times late at night, past midnight, when I was coming back from a run to the bodega, on the corner there was no light at all. Not darkness, as in the lights are off. Darkness, as in the gap under the door, looked deeper than 1/2 inch. Like the floor on the other side was lower than it should have been, or further away, or not there. The rational part of my brain offered explanations. I'd been working overtime at the warehouse where I sorted freight for a distribution company, and my schedule had shifted to a rotation that put me on early mornings one week and late evenings the next. My sleep was fragmented. Fragmented sleep does things to perception, affects depth, alters color balance, makes shadows seem to have weight. The changing light under the door could have been reflections from the street, or the woman's lamp on a dimmer, or my own exhaustion rearranging what my eyes were reporting. The sounds were harder to dismiss. Most apartment doors are not soundproof. You hear things through them: music, conversations, cooking sounds, the thump of someone walking across a hardwood floor. From 4B, I heard almost nothing. The woman was quiet. In 5 months, I had never heard her television, her music, her phone conversations. The only sounds I'd ever registered from 4B were the occasional muted click of a light switch and, once, the sound of running water. But in late February, I started hearing something else. It wasn't a voice or a television or music. It was the sound of the door itself, the hinges, the closer, the latch. From inside my apartment, through the wall that separated my living room from the hallway, I could hear the door to 4B cycling, opening, closing, opening, closing. Not rapidly, not like someone was swinging it back and forth, slowly, methodically, at varying speeds. Sometimes the close was long and drawn out, the hiss of the hydraulic arm stretched over 10-15 seconds. Sometimes it was short, a brisk snap that took less than a second. And sometimes it was somewhere in between, a normal 3-second close that sounded exactly like every other door in the building. It happened at night, always at night, between roughly 1 and 4 in the morning, though I never timed it precisely because timing it would have meant admitting I was listening. I told myself the woman was going in and out. Insomnia, maybe. Restlessness. Some people pace their apartments at night. Some people step into the hallway for air, or to check the mail, or because their apartment feels too small at 3 in the morning and the hallway feels like somewhere else. I told myself it was her. But one night, I heard the cycling and I was already awake. I'd been lying on the couch. I'd started sleeping there some nights when the bedroom felt too close to the shared wall, and I realized I hadn't brought in a package I'd left outside my door earlier that evening. I unlocked my door, opened it just enough to reach the package, and as I bent down to grab it, I saw the door to 4B. It was cycling. The hallway was empty. The lights were on their usual dim nighttime setting. No one was there, and the door to 4B was opening and closing on its own. I straightened up, package in hand, and watched. The door opened, not all the way, just about 18 inches, as if someone had pushed it from inside and then let go and then closed. Slowly, the hydraulic arm hissed. The door traveled through its arc. The latch clicked. Then, maybe 5 seconds later, it opened again. Same distance, 18 inches, and closed. Faster this time, 2 seconds. Then again, 18 inches open. Close. 7 seconds. Again. 18 inches. Close. 1 second. Again. Close. 4 seconds. The speed was different every time. There was no pattern I could identify. It wasn't speeding up or slowing down in sequence. It was varying, according to a logic I didn't have access to. I stood in the hallway in my socks and a t-shirt and watched a door open and close by itself for what I later estimated was about 3 minutes. I don't know why I didn't knock. I don't know why I didn't call out. I think it was because the door was doing something so specific that interrupting it felt like interrupting a conversation I wasn't part of. After 3 minutes, the door stopped. It closed one final time, a medium-speed close, maybe 3 seconds, and stayed shut. The hallway was quiet. I could hear Mrs. Palava's television, faintly, through the wall of 4C. I could hear the radiator ticking. Normal sounds, building sounds. I went back inside. I locked my door. Both locks. The next morning, I knocked on 4B. I decided, during the hours between the door cycling and my alarm going off, that I was going to talk to her. Not about the door, just talk. Introduce myself. 5 months of living across the hall and I didn't know her name. I would say hello, maybe mention something about the building, and see if she gave me anything, a detail, an expression. something that would help me determine whether she was aware that her door was doing what it was doing. She didn't answer. I knocked 3 times over the course of a minute. I listened. No sound from inside. No footsteps. No shifting. Nothing. I went to work. That evening, I knocked again. This time, I heard something. Not footsteps, not a voice. The sound of a lock disengaging, the deadbolt turning, but the door didn't open. The lock turned, and then nothing. I waited. I knocked again. The lock turned again, this time engaging, locking, from inside. Someone was on the other side of the door, close enough to operate the lock, and they were choosing not to open it. "Hi," I said, feeling absurd. "I'm your neighbor, 4A. I just wanted to introduce myself." Silence. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'll be across the hall if you need anything." I went back to my apartment. I sat on my couch and stared at my own door and felt the particular discomfort of having spoken to a closed door and received a lock as a response. But the interaction clarified something. She was in there. She was conscious. She was able to operate the lock. Whatever was happening with the door at night, she was present for it. March came. The cycling continued. Every night, between 1 and 4, I stopped getting up to check. I lay on the couch and listened to it through the wall, the hiss, the click, the hiss, the click at different speeds, different durations, like a code being transmitted in a language made entirely of door sounds. I started losing sleep. Not because the sound was loud, it wasn't. It was quiet enough that if I'd had a fan running or music playing, I wouldn't have heard it. I lost sleep because I was listening. Because my body had started waking me at 12:45, 15 minutes before the cycling typically began, as if my circadian rhythm had recalibrated itself around the schedule of a neighbor's door. I finally called Nico. I left a voicemail. I said the door to 4B seemed to have a problem with its closer, that it was making noise at night, and could he take a look? I didn't say the door was opening and closing by itself. I didn't say the speed changed. I said, noise, closer, night, noise. The kind of complaint a normal tenant makes about a normal mechanical problem. Nico called me back 2 days later. He said he'd gone up to 4 and checked the closers on all the doors. They were all functioning normally. The one on 4B was set to standard speed. He'd tested it, opened the door, let it close, timed it at about 3 seconds. No issues. "Did you go inside?" I asked. She wasn't home. I knocked. No answer. "But did you test the door from the inside? Open it from the inside and let it close?" "I tested the closer. It's fine. You want, I can put some felt on the latch so it doesn't click so loud." "Yeah, sure. That would be great." He didn't put felt on the latch. I didn't expect him to. The cycling continued, and in the nights that followed, I noticed something new. The door was not only changing its closing speed, it was changing the angle at which it opened. For weeks, it had been opening to about 18 inches, consistent, just enough to see a sliver of the apartment's interior, though from my door I could never see much a wall, the edge of a light fixture, a portion of floor. But in mid-March, the angle started varying. Some nights, the door would open only a few inches, barely a crack. The hiss of the closer would be almost inaudible. Other nights, it would open wider 2 feet, 3 feet. Once, I watched from my peephole as the door opened what I estimated to be about 90 degrees, fully perpendicular to the frame, and held there for a long moment before closing. When it closed from that fully open position, the speed was glacial. I watched through the peephole for what felt like a minute, maybe longer, as the door crept back toward the frame, millimeter by millimeter, the hydraulic arm producing a sound so low and sustained it was more vibration than noise. And during that slow close, I saw the inside of the apartment. I don't know what I expected. I think I expected an apartment, a mirror image of my own, furniture, carpet, walls, the evidence of someone living. What I saw was a hallway. Not the hallway I was standing in, a different one. The interior of 4B, as seen through the open door, was a corridor longer than any room in these apartments should be. extending back from the doorway in a straight line, with walls that were the same off-white as the building's corridors, and a floor that were the same grey-brown carpet as the fourth floor's common areas. There were doors on either side, apartment doors, with brass numbers. The door closed before I could read the numbers. The latch clicked. Whatever I'd seen behind the door was gone. I pulled away from the peephole. My eye hurt from pressing against it. I stood in my dark apartment and breathed and felt my heart doing something it shouldn't do, a kind of syncopated stutter that wasn't painful, but wasn't right. I told myself I'd seen the apartment's foyer, and the dim light and the angle had made it look like a hallway. Foyers in these apartments are narrow. They have coat hooks and shoe racks, and the light switch is on the left, and if you're looking through a peephole at night, through a door that's 90 degrees open across a dimly lit hallway, your brain fills in details from context. I live in an apartment building. I see hallways every day. My brain constructed a hallway because it was working with limited visual data. I almost believed it. For 2 days, I sat with that explanation and tried to let it settle into something solid. It didn't. 2 nights later, the door opened again to 90 degrees, and this time I was at the peephole before it started closing. The slow close began, and I had maybe 45 seconds of visibility before the angle narrowed too much to see inside. It was a hallway, the same hallway, off-white walls, grey-brown carpet, apartment doors on both sides. But this time, because I was watching from the start of the close, I had a wider initial view, and I could see further down the corridor. The hallway extended much further than the footprint of apartment 4B could possibly allow. The apartment, like mine, was roughly 600 square feet. The hallway I was looking at went back at least 50 feet, maybe more, before the light diminished to the point where I couldn't see the end. And the doors. I could read numbers on 2 of them before the angle closed. The first one said 4A. The second one said 4A. The same number, my number, on 2 different doors, on opposite sides of a hallway that shouldn't exist, inside an apartment that was 20 feet wide. The door to 4B closed. The latch clicked. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment on, and I listened for the cycling, and it didn't come. The door was quiet. The hallway was quiet. The building was quiet, except for the radiator and Mrs. Palova's television and the elevator cables, and the faucet in my bathroom that dripped when the building's water pressure changed. In the morning, I went to the building's management office on the ground floor. Denise was behind the desk, surrounded by the usual stacks of lease folders and parking complaints. The office smelled like printer toner and the coffee she kept in a thermos that she never seemed to finish. I asked her about 4B. What about it? Who lives there? She looked at her screen. She typed something. She frowned. That unit's vacant. It's not vacant. There's a woman living there. I've seen her. Denise looked at her screen again. 4B has been vacant since August. We had a tenant, Miss Nkoku, but she moved out. We haven't relisted it yet because there's a plumbing issue Nico needs to address first. There's someone living there. There's no one on the lease. I've seen her 3 times. She comes out. She wears a coat. Sir, I can tell you what the system shows. 4B is vacant. If you've seen someone in the hallway, they might be visiting another tenant, or they might be in the wrong building. It happens. I left the office. I went back upstairs. I stood in front of 4B's door. I pressed my ear against it. I heard nothing. I got down on the floor and looked under the gap. The light on the other side was warm, yellow, normal, apartment light, coming from a unit that was supposedly empty and had been for 7 months. I knocked 3 times. No answer. I knocked again. The lock disengaged. The deadbolt turned. The door opened. Not all the way. About 18 inches. The familiar distance. But this time, the door stayed open. The closer did not pull it back. The arm was extended. The cylinder was engaged, but the door held its position as if someone were holding it from the other side, though I could see the edge of the door, and there was no hand on it. Through the 18-inch gap, I could see the apartment, not a hallway, an apartment, a narrow foyer with a coat hook and a shoe rack and a light switch on the left wall. Beyond the foyer, a living room that looked like a mirror image of mine. Same layout, same window placement, same archway to the kitchen, but the furniture was different. There was a couch against the far wall, dark green, with a blanket folded over the arm, a small table with a lamp, a bookshelf half filled with paperbacks. A mug on the table, as if someone had been sitting there recently and gotten up. The apartment was lived in. It was warm. I could feel the heat coming through the gap, a subtle shift in air temperature that told me the radiator inside was running. There was a smell, too. Not unpleasant, faintly like coffee and lavender, the way a space smells when someone lives there consistently and their daily routines have saturated the walls. "Hello?" I said. No one answered. No one appeared. The door began to close. The closer kicked in. The hiss started. And the speed was the slowest I had ever witnessed. The door moved slowly, painfully slowly, like something geological, like time itself had weight. It crept toward the frame, a fraction of an inch at a time, and the hiss of the hydraulic arm was so low and so sustained that it felt less like a sound and more like a pressure in my ears. I watched it close. It took, by my best estimate, over 2 minutes. 2 minutes for a door to travel 18 inches. During those 2 minutes, the apartment behind the door remained visible, stable, real. The mug on the table, the blanket on the couch, the books on the shelf, everything stayed. Then the door closed. The latch clicked. I tried the knob. Locked. Both locks. Deadbolt engaged. I went back to my apartment. I sat on my couch. I thought about calling someone, Nico, Denise, the police, a friend. I picked up my phone 3 times and put it down 3 times. What would I report? My neighbor's door closes at different speeds. There's an apartment that management says is vacant but looks furnished. I saw a hallway inside it once, but now it's a living room? The woman who lives there doesn't answer the door but operates the locks. None of those are emergencies. None of those are crimes. None of those are anything when you say them out loud. I put the phone down. That night, the cycling started at 12:50, earlier than usual. I was still awake on the couch, sitting up with the lights on, listening. The door opened and closed, opened and closed. Different speeds every time. I wasn't watching through the peephole. I was just listening, counting the duration of each close. 9 seconds, 2 seconds, 5 seconds, 1 second, 14 seconds, 3 seconds. I grabbed a pen from the side table and started writing the numbers on the back of an envelope. 9, 2, 5, 1, 14, 3. Then a new burst. 7, 7, 4, 11, 1, 6. Then another. 8, 3, 3, 2, 19, 5. I stared at the numbers. I looked for a pattern. I added them. I subtracted them. I looked for a sequence. I looked for repetition. Nothing resolved into meaning. But I kept writing, every night, for a week. After 7 nights, I had pages of numbers. Columns of durations, each one representing the time it took the door to 4B to close, measured by my count, not precise, not scientific, but consistent in method. I counted 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, the way you time things when you don't have a stopwatch, and the thing you're timing exists on the other side of a wall. During those 7 days, the cycling shaped my life in ways I didn't fully notice until later. I stopped accepting evening shifts at the warehouse. I started buying groceries in bulk so I wouldn't need to leave after dark. I kept a pen and paper on the couch cushion next to me, always ready. My apartment, which had felt like a home for 5 months, started to feel like a listening post. On the 8th night, I found the pattern. Not in the numbers themselves, in the gaps between sessions. The cycling happened in bursts. The door would open and close 6 to 10 times, then stop. After a pause of maybe 5 to 8 minutes, it would start again. Another burst, another pause. The bursts and pauses repeated 3 to 5 times per night. The length of each pause was decreasing, not the closing speeds. Those remained unpatterned, but the silence between bursts was shrinking. On the first night I'd measured, the average pause was about 7 minutes. By the 4th night, it was 5. By the 7th, It was 3. The bursts were getting closer together. The door was resting less. I didn't know what that meant, but I recognized the shape. Acceleration. Something was building towards something. The pauses were compression. The silence between bursts was being squeezed out, and at some point the pauses would reach 0. The cycling would become continuous. The door would open and close without stopping, and I didn't know what came after that. At the end of March, on a night when the rain was hitting the window hard enough to almost drown out the cycling, I went to the peephole. I hadn't looked through it in over a week. I'd been avoiding it the way you avoid looking at a wound you know is getting worse. The door to 4B was open, wider than I'd ever seen it, not 90 degrees more. It was open past perpendicular, pressed back against the hallway wall, the hydraulic arm fully extended, the metal straining. No door in the building had ever opened that far. The closer was designed to limit the arc to about 100 degrees. This was beyond that. The door was flat against the wall, as if something had pushed it from inside with enough force to override the mechanical stop. And through the opening filling the entire doorframe, I could see the hallway again. The other hallway, the one inside 4B, that went further back than the building allowed. Off-white walls, grey-brown carpet, doors on both sides, brass numbers. But this time, the hallway was different. Some of the doors were open. Not all of them, maybe 4 or 5, at varying distances down the corridor, on both sides. They were open at different angles. One was ajar, a few inches, another was open about 30 degrees, another was wide open, and each one was moving. Each door was in the process of closing, at its own individual speed, and as each one clicked shut, it opened again, at a different angle, and began closing again. The hallway was cycling, not just one door, all of them, independently, at different speeds. A corridor full of doors performing the same behavior that 4B had been performing in my hallway for weeks. Opening and closing, varying speeds. I watched. I don't know how long. The doors cycled. Some closed in fractions of a second. Some took what seemed like a minute. The sound was layered a chorus of hydraulic hisses and latch clicks, overlapping and out of phase, like an arrhythmic mechanical heartbeat distributed across a space that shouldn't exist. And then one of the doors, one of the ones further down the hallway, maybe 30 or 40 feet in, opened wider than the others, and I saw through it. Behind that door was another hallway, the same hallway, off-white walls, grey-brown carpet, doors on both sides, and those doors were cycling too. I could see them, small in the distance, opening and closing at their own speeds, producing sounds I couldn't hear from where I stood but could somehow feel a sub-audible rhythm that vibrated in the bones of my face. I pulled away from the peephole. My face was wet. I'd been pressing against the door so hard that the rubber rim of the peephole had left a ring around my eye. I wiped my face. My hand was shaking. I went to the couch. I didn't sleep. The cycling continued until 4, as always, and then stopped. The building was quiet. The rain stopped. I lay in the dark and listened to nothing and thought about doors. The next evening, I came home from work and the woman was in the hallway. She was standing in front of 4B's door, not going in, not coming out, standing. Her back was to me. She was wearing the tan raincoat. Her hand was on the doorknob, but she wasn't turning it. She was just standing there, holding the knob, the way someone holds a railing when they're about to go downstairs and aren't sure their legs will hold them. "Hey," I said, gently, carefully. "The way you talk to someone who looks like they might be having a bad day, or a bad year." She turned her head. Not her body, just her head, rotated toward me over her shoulder. Her face was tired. Not dramatically exhausted, not hollow-eyed or gaunt. Just tired in the specific way of someone who hasn't been sleeping well for a long time and has stopped noticing it. "You're 4A, she said. "Yeah. How long have you lived here?" "About 6 months. She nodded. She looked at the door. She was still holding the knob. "Have you been hearing it?" she asked. I didn't pretend not to understand. "Yes." "How long?" "A few weeks. Maybe a month." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "It starts with the speed, the closing speed. That's the first thing you notice. Yeah. Then the cycling at night. Yeah. Then you see the hallway. I didn't answer. You've seen it, she said. I didn't answer immediately, because saying yes would mean accepting that everything after that answer would also be real, that the hallway existed, that the doors with my number on them existed, that the sound I heard every night was not a mechanical fault but something else entirely, something that had been happening across the hall from me while I slept, or tried to, for weeks. I looked through the peephole, I said. She let go of the doorknob. She turned fully toward me. She leaned against the wall next to her door, and the posture was so weary, so fundamentally tired, that I felt something shift in the way I understood this situation. She wasn't oblivious to the door. She wasn't responsible for it. She was enduring it. My name is Miriam, she said. I'm Chris. Chris? Okay. She looked at the ceiling. How many hallways did you see? 2. The main one, and then one through a door inside the first one. It goes deeper than that. How do you know? Because I've been inside. She said it the way someone says they've been to a particular city factually, without emphasis, as a piece of biographical information that happened to be extraordinary. The first time was an accident, she said. The door was cycling one night. I opened it to check the closer. I thought it was broken. I stepped into the foyer. The door closed behind me. Normal speed, 3 seconds. But when I turned around, the foyer wasn't there anymore. The hallway was. And you walked down it. I didn't have a choice. The door I came through was closed, and it was locked from the other side, my side. I was standing in a hallway that shouldn't have been there, and the only way to go was forward. She crossed her arms. She looked at the floor. It looks the same in every direction. The same walls, the same carpet, the same doors. The numbers on the doors change, but they're always apartment numbers, real ones. Numbers from this building. 4A, 4B, 3C, 2F, 1A, all mixed up, no order, and every door is cycling, opening and closing at different speeds. You can hear it, all of it, all at once, hundreds of doors going at different rates. It's the loudest quiet sound I've ever heard. What's behind the doors? More hallways. Always more hallways. I opened one. It was labeled 4A, your apartment. Behind it was another corridor, same as the one I was in, with more doors, more cycling. I opened another one, same thing. Every door leads to another hallway full of doors, and every door in that hallway leads to another hallway full of doors. How far did you go? I don't know. I walked for what felt like an hour. Maybe it was less. Time didn't feel right in there, not distorted, just unmeasured, like I couldn't hold on to the increments. I kept opening doors and walking through hallways, and the cycling never stopped. The doors were always going, always at different speeds. And the further I went, the more I started to notice something. She stopped. She looked at me, and her expression wasn't fearful. It was careful. The expression of someone deciding how much to say. After a while, it stops feeling random. She said, not predictable, just intentional, like something is being measured, even if you don't understand what the unit is. Measured how? I can't explain it better than that. You feel it in the rhythm, in the way the speeds relate to each other. It's not chaos, it's calibration. But I don't know what's being calibrated or why or for what. She paused. Her arms were still crossed, and she gripped her own elbows the way people do when they're holding themselves together. But I know one thing. When I finally found my way back, when I opened a door and the apartment was behind it, my apartment, my foyer, my coat hook, the door behind me closed. And the speed it closed at was different from every other time I'd heard it. It closed in exactly the amount of time I'd been inside. I'd been in the hallways for roughly an hour. The door took roughly an hour to close. I stared at her. That's not possible. I sat in my foyer and watched the door close for an hour. It moved so slowly I could barely see it moving, like a minute hand. You know it's moving, but you can't perceive the motion at any given instant. You can only see it's moved by comparing where it was to where it is. What happened when it finally closed? The latch clicked. And the apartment was normal. The hallway was gone. The cycling stopped for 3 days. And then it started again. She pushed off the wall. She straightened up. She looked at me with the particular directness of someone who has made a decision. "It's been 4 months," she said. "The cycling is getting faster. The pauses between bursts are almost gone. And last week, the door opened on its own while I was sitting in my living room, not the hallway side. My side. It opened, and the hallway was there, right there in my apartment. And the cycling was louder than I'd ever heard it. And the doors inside were opening wider. And I could see through them through layers and layers of hallways, all the way to something at the center that all the corridors were arranged around. And it was..." She stopped. "What was it?" "A door," she said, "at the center of all the hallways. One door that wasn't cycling. It was still, completely still, closed, and it was labeled. Ah, 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 used, ah, used, ah, ah, used, ah, ah, used, used, ah, used, ah, used, used, ah, used, ah, used, used, you. What was the label? She looked at me. It didn't have a number, she said. It had a name, my name. The hallway was quiet. The radiator ticked. Mrs. Palova's television murmured. The elevator cables groaned somewhere below us. "I think the cycling is the mechanism," Miriam said. "I think each door's speed is connected to something real. And I think when the speeds converge, when all the doors in all those hallways are finally closing at the same rate, the door at the center will open. And what happens then? I think that's what I'm here to find out. I think that's why the apartment called to me. The listing wasn't even public when I found it. Denise said the unit hadn't been listed, that there was a plumbing issue. She didn't know how I'd gotten the address, but I had it. It was written on a piece of paper in my coat pocket, and I don't remember writing it. I noticed it then when she turned the knob. There was no key in her hand. She hadn't reached into her pocket. She hadn't produced a key ring. She just turned the knob and the lock disengaged, as if the door recognized her hand, or as if the distinction between locked and unlocked had stopped applying to her. The door opened 3 seconds, normal speed, the hydraulic arm performing its function exactly as designed. Through the doorframe I saw the apartment, the couch, the blanket, the mug on the table, the bookshelf, the lamp. She stepped inside. "If it has my name on it," she said without turning around, "then it's always been my door. I just hadn't found it yet." The closer pulled the door back. It closed at a speed I hadn't heard before, somewhere between 5 and 6 seconds. A deliberate speed, a considered speed. The speed of a door that is closing on purpose. The latch clicked. I stood in the hallway for a long time. The building settled around me. The lights hummed. Somewhere below, the elevator cables shifted. I stood there until my feet ached from the cold of the tile through my socks, and then I went inside my apartment. I locked both locks. I sat on the couch. I pulled the blanket over my legs. I listened. The cycling started at 11 that night, 3 hours earlier than ever before. I could hear it through the wall, the doors, the clicks, the hisses, but not from one source, from many. The sound was layered, dimensional, coming from the wall and the floor and the ceiling, as if the hallways behind 4B were no longer confined to the space behind 4B, as if they were expanding, spreading into the architecture of the building itself. And between the bursts, which were now separated by less than a minute of silence, I heard something else, a new sound, or rather, the absence of a sound, a specific silence. The kind of silence that a door makes when it is perfectly, completely, deliberately still, when it is not opening and not closing, when it is holding its position with the absolute certainty of something that has been waiting a long time and is no longer waiting. The sound of a door with a name on it. I don't know when the cycling stopped. I must have fallen asleep, because when I opened my eyes it was morning and the building was quiet and the light through my window was the gray-white of an overcast day. My neck was stiff from sleeping on the couch. My mouth was dry. I went to the hallway. I stood in front of 4B. The door was closed, quiet, normal. I looked at the gap underneath. Warm yellow light, normal light. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again, no answer. I pressed my ear to the door. Nothing. No television, no water, no movement, no lock turning, no cycling. Something had changed in the quality of the silence. The previous silences from 4B had been the silence of someone being quiet, a held breath, a deliberate stillness. This was different. This was the silence of absence, of vacancy, of a space that no longer contained anything that could produce sound. I went to work. I came home. I knocked again. Nothing. I knocked the next day. Nothing. Each day the silence felt deeper, more settled, as if the apartment was slowly forgetting it had ever been occupied. I knocked every day for a week, and each time, the absence on the other side felt less like a person choosing not to answer and more like a room choosing not to exist. On the 8th day, I went back to Denise. 4B, I said, has anyone checked on the tenant? I told you before, there's no tenant in 4B, it's vacant. There was a woman, Miriam, she lived there. Denise checked her screen. We've never had a tenant named Miriam in 4B. The last tenant was Miss Nkoku, who left in August. Can you check if anyone named Miriam has ever leased a unit in this building? She typed, she scrolled, she shook her head. No results. I stood in her office, and I felt the ground shift under me. Not physically, conceptually. The way the world shifts when you realize that the thing you experienced and the thing the records show are two separate realities, and you have no evidence for yours beyond your own memory. I went back to the 4th floor. I stood in front of 4B. I tried the knob, locked. I got down on the floor and looked under the gap. The light was gone, not off gone. The gap was dark, not the darkness of an unlit room, a deeper darkness, the kind that didn't look like shadow, it looked like distance. Like the floor on the other side wasn't just unlit, it was further away than half an inch of gap should allow. As if the space behind the door had opened up into something vast and lightless, and what I was seeing through the gap was the near edge of it. I stayed on the floor for a moment. My cheek was against the hallway carpet. It smelled like dust and cleaning solution, and the particular staleness of a building that has been breathing the same air for decades. I looked into that darkness, and it did not resolve into anything recognizable. It was just depth, directionless, scaleless depth. I got up. I went into my apartment. I locked both locks. The apartment felt different that evening. Not changed, nothing had moved, nothing was out of place. But the quality of the space had shifted, the way a room shifts when you find out someone has been in it while you were away, not violated, noticed. As if my apartment had been observed by something that was now done observing and had left behind only the faint residue of attention. That night, I lay on the couch and listened. The building was quiet, no cycling, no hissing, no clicking, no doors. But at 2 in the morning, I heard a new sound. My door. Not 4B's door, mine, 4A. My own door, the one I'd locked, both locks, the one with the hydraulic closer I'd never thought about because it had always worked exactly as it should. My door made a sound, a small sound. The quiet groan of a hinge adjusting under pressure, the faint, almost imperceptible hiss of a hydraulic arm engaging. I sat up. I looked at the door. It was closed. Both locks were engaged. The deadbolt was turned. The chain was latched. But the closer was active. I could see the arm, the metal bar at the top of the door, and it was taut, engaged, under tension. As if the door had just been opened and the closer was preparing to pull it shut, except the door hadn't been opened. The door was closed and locked, and the closer was straining against a movement that hadn't occurred. And then, slowly, so slowly, that I almost convinced myself I was imagining it, the door began to move. Not open, not close. It was already closed. But the quality of its closedness changed. The way it sat in the frame shifted. The gap between the door and the frame, the thin line of shadow on the hinge side widened, fractionally, imperceptibly, like the door was being pulled into the frame from the other side. Like the frame itself was deepening, creating space between the door and the hallway that hadn't existed before. I stared at it. The closer hissed, low and sustained. The sound I'd been hearing through the wall for weeks, but now it was my closer, my door, my hiss. And under the door, in the gap between the bottom of the door and my apartment's floor, the light from the hallway changed. The warm, dim nighttime light of the fourth-floor corridor shifted. It cooled. It became the blue-white light I'd seen under 4B's door weeks ago. And then it deepened. And then it went dark. The darkness under my door was the same darkness I'd seen under hers. Deep, structural. The kind of dark that isn't the absence of light, but the presence of distance. I got off the couch. I walked to the door. I stood 3 feet away. My closer was still hissing. My door was still shifting in its frame, settling into some new relationship with the wall around it. The brass numbers on the outside 4A, my numbers, I could see their faint shape through the peephole's distortion, and they looked the same. 4A, still my apartment, still my door. But the closer was engaged. And the speed at which something was happening, some transition, some mechanical process I didn't have a name for, was specific, deliberate, not random, not broken, calibrated. I thought about what Miriam had said. Each door's speed is connected to something real, like a reading, like a measurement, something intentional, even if you don't understand the unit. I thought about the hallways behind 4B, the hundreds of doors, all cycling at different speeds, and the door at the center, the still door, the quiet door, the door with her name on it, the door she walked toward because she believed it had always been hers. I looked at my own door. My closer was hissing. The sound was steady, patient, the sound of a mechanism that has all the time it needs. I backed away. I went to the couch. I sat down. I pulled the blanket over my legs, not because I was cold, but because I wanted the weight of something over me. The hissing continued. It's been 3 weeks since that night. The cycling from 4B has not returned. The apartment across the hall is silent, permanently, completely silent. Denise has still not listed it. Nico has not gone in to fix the plumbing issue that supposedly exists. No one mentions 4B. No one asks about it. It has become the kind of absence that other people don't notice because they never noticed the presence. But my door has started cycling. It doesn't open. The locks hold. The chain holds. The door stays closed. But the closer engages every night. And the sound it makes, the hiss, the tension, the slow mechanical breath of a hydraulic arm working against something I can't see changes speed. Every night. Different durations, different intensities. The way it sits in the frame shifts and settles and shifts again, and the gap underneath alternates between hallway light and that deep, structural darkness. I've started counting. I sit on my couch and I count the durations, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, and I write them on the back of envelopes and napkins and the margins of junk mail, and the numbers don't form a pattern, and the pauses between bursts are getting shorter. I think the doors aren't leading somewhere. I think they're sorting something. I think each speed is a measurement, and each measurement is specific to whoever is listening, and the cycling doesn't stop until the measurement is complete. I think Miriam's door finished measuring her. I think when it was done, it opened the door at the center and she walked through it, because by then it felt like the only door that had ever been hers. And I think my door is measuring me now. I haven't opened it after dark in 11 days. I come home before sunset. I lock both locks. I latch the chain. I sit on the couch, and I listen to my door calibrate itself. And sometimes, not every night, but more nights than not, I press my ear against the door, and through the wood, through the metal of the locks, through the mechanism of the closer, I hear something on the other side, not the hallway, not Mrs. Palova's television, not the radiator, not the elevator. Doors, dozens of them, hundreds, opening and closing at different speeds, far away and getting closer. And underneath all of them, at the bottom of the sound, beneath every hiss and every click, a silence. A single, perfect, absolute silence. The silence of a door that isn't cycling. A door that is still. A door that is waiting, in a hallway that is almost here, with a name on it that I haven't read yet, but already know. I haven't opened my door after dark in 11 days. Tonight is 12. The closer just engaged. And the speed is one I haven't heard before. It's slow. Slower than anything I've recorded. Slower than Miriam described. Slower than a minute hand. I've been counting for a while now. I stopped writing the numbers down because I realized something halfway through the count. This isn't the door closing. It's the amount of time it's taking something to reach the other side. And just now, from somewhere deep in the wood, behind the locks, behind the frame, I heard it. A second latch.